But let's look deeper into the story of Thanksgiving. So back in the 1600s, King George I was persecuting everyone that didn't comply and recognized that the state was the ultimate authority in all things, religion, how you live your life, and so forth. And so there was a group of people that were called the Separatists, that were called Puritans, that we know as pilgrims today. And these folks were hunted down. They were hunted down and they were punished. Sometimes, the wording in the Constitution, talks about cruel and unusual punishments. And a lot of these separatists, these folks that did not want to comply with the state-controlled Church of England, were given some very cruel and unusual punishments. And so this group of separatists, known as the Pilgrims, they said, we've had enough of the religious persecution. We're getting out of here. And so they first fled to the nation of Holland. They were there for 11 or 12 years. And, things improved in Holland. As Rush would say, they got to wear some wooden shoes and look at windmills and look at the tulips or whatever. But they lived in Holland for some time. And, it wasn't perfect. They weren't completely free there religiously either. There is evidence to suggest that Bradford was concerned about the impact that culture was having on their community, negative impact. And there were reports that they also wanted to spread the gospel and so forth. But for several reasons, one of those, of course, ultimately being they still weren't quite as free religiously as they had hoped to be. They decided that they were going to embark upon a journey to the New World. Now, we should know that a journey to the New World via ship in the 1600s was not anything like any of us can remotely relate to today. Neither is landing in a new world in November, which is when they actually landed at Plymouth, Massachusetts. Well, that's actually when the ship set up itself in the harbor. They didn't actually leave the ship until they finished writing and signing the Mayflower Compact. I think they didn't leave the ship until December, actually, but they landed, so to speak. They parked the ship in the harbor in November. It's a 66-day journey. I've seen 65 and I've seen 66-day journey across the Atlantic Ocean, in the fall, the North Atlantic. It wasn't a balmy trip, and a tiny little ship. This ship was tiny. I mean, there are millionaires and billionaires today, that have yachts that are much more massive than what the Pilgrims came across on. And so they realized it was time to go. It was time to go to the New World. Now, a couple of things about this. One, there were about 40 pilgrims that decided to make this journey to the New World, and they wanted to establish religious liberty. There might have been other reasons as well, but at the top of that list was being able to live their lives, which, of course, living their lives is synonymous with being able to exercise religious liberty because they were devout people. These were one and the same thing to them. And so they wanted to be able to live their lives and live in accordance with their conscience in worship of their Creator as they chose. And so they sought, that was at the top of the list. Again, there could have been other reasons that I've alluded to. Some of them I haven't. But nonetheless, they decided to embark upon that journey. Roughly 40 of them. There were other people that were on that ship as well. We think there were 102 total passengers. There could have been up to 30 crew. Tiny ship. They knew they were going to face hardship, but living freely and worshiping God in accordance to their conscience was at the top of their priorities. So. Couple of things here. In order to get on that ship and to go to the New World, they needed they needed to have money. And so they had these merchant, I think they were called merchant adventurers. These were people that were investors, basically. They were sponsors. And so they provided the funds required to make this trip happen. Now, these were investors, so they wanted to be paid back. However, these investors had requirements. One of the requirements that the investors had was that everyone who was a part of the colony, the Pilgrims colony, which would eventually be known as the Plymouth colony because of where they landed in Plymouth, Massachusetts. This colony was going to be, everyone had a common share. So everything, they all owned it together. Every piece of land, every structure, everything was equally owned by everybody in the community. This was a requirement that was put upon the Pilgrims by the investors, by these merchant adventurers, if you will. And so that's important to file away in your memory for just a little bit as we get through this story. So they get on the ship. They take a journey across the ocean, 65, 66 days. They miss their target location. They end up in Massachusetts. As they're parked there in the bay, they decide there was concern. The concern was we really are outside of the area we're supposed to be in. There was actually some dissension, according to some of these reports and records and so forth, historical accounts, as to what they should do. And so they said, look, okay, we're going to establish this governing charter, right? So we're going to try to accommodate the fact that we're not really where we're supposed to be. These are going to be our rules. Them's the rules. Mayflower Compact. And so William Bradford, who's the governor, the leader of this group, set out to, they penned the Mayflower Compact. And these were laws that everybody agreed to live by. I think it was signed by 41 people. The laws, by the way, were rooted firmly in the Bible, as you would expect from this group of very devoutly religious people. And so these were people of faith. Think about this. They came across the ocean with, truly just a wing and a prayer in a sense, right? And so they land. It's November. There's nothing there. It's desolate. It's bleak. There's no grocery stores. I think, and this is something Rush would talk about, the fact that we cannot relate to this. We cannot, as average everyday Americans, we cannot relate to this. Short of people who have been in extreme military situations or something like that, the average person, we can't relate to this, right? We have a saying in America today. We say first world problems. We don't have Wi-Fi, or if the coffee's not hot, or if the internet's down, or if our phone charger, we forgot it at home. This ruins days for people. These are things the Pilgrims would have been happy, problems they would have been happy to have. They were talking about and focusing upon mere survival. No shelter, no 7-Eleven, no grocery store, no Walmart, no Target, none of that. No Uber, no Southwest Airlines, none of that. They had none of that. They get off the ship. They have their Mayflower Compact. They have their faith, but they're heading into the winter. It's colder. There's nothing there. And they made a great sacrifice to get here.